Look at these pictures. Union thugs literally ripping the shirts off the back of their employers. This is a scene in France and Belgium this week as union workers lash out over there. Well, now the White House wants to give unions more power over here. President Obama is saying this week that we need even stronger laws to help unions. But, Mike, are stronger labor laws going to lead us to the European model?
Yes, David. Specifically, they're going to lead us to the French model. And France has had the worst economy of all the major industrial nations in Europe since 1990. We do not want the French model. It creates an environment where people don't want to invest in businesses, and it removes incentive for workers to produce.
And, Bruce, you know, we look at those scenes over there, and we think it could never happen here. But couldn't it?
I don't know about that. I don't think so. I think what the president is doing is he's going back to his roots here in Chicago, where he was a big supporter of the healthcare workers, which they raised benefits and they raised salaries in the lower paid healthcare workers. And they also worked to improve quality in hospitals with better policies to control infections.
But, Rich, when you talk about the president going back to his activist roots, that doesn't make me feel better. Does it make you feel better?
No, it doesn't. Look, union membership in private companies is trending down. He's concerned about that. There's a reason why it's trending down. The American people are glad that it is.
By the way, let me just interrupt for a second, Rich. It's trending down in the private sector, but of course union membership among government workers in the public sector, that red line is going up.
Yeah, it is, and even FDR thought that public sector unions were fundamentally should be against the law because they pitted Americans against their own government. But look, he's trying to stop this great trend. In France, we also saw earlier this summer people overturning Uber cars. In the United States, we embrace Uber cars because we're more entrepreneurial.
Well, most of us embrace it, but the union lobby doesn't embrace it. And, Steve, again, when you compare France to the United States, look at the strikes. The number of strikes they have there is incredible. And this is a number of man-hours that are lost, 3.8 million man-hours lost in France because of strikes. That's about 10 times what we have here.
That's right. That kind of unionization just shreds any kind of flexibility and innovation. You saw it in this country in the auto industry. Detroit shackled, the rest of the country not. The auto industry and the rest of the country in terms of manufacturing did very well.
John, what do you think?
Well, I just think the point here is that President Obama shouldn't have an opinion on this matter at all. There's this fiction that persists that presidents create jobs. They do no such thing. And so in this case, Obama's stance should be he will protect the rights of individuals to contract with any kind of business of any kind. If that includes joining unions, fine. But the president should not have an opinion.
By the way, EMAG, that number that I put out was actually not man hours. That was man days, working days that are lost because of these strikes in France. It's a huge number.
That's a huge number. And you saw also the other fever line chart you saw was started in 2009 when there were more government workers in unions versus union workers in the private sector. That's under the Obama administration. Yes, Steve is right. France is, we had it in Detroit. And what we have right now is union workers in the government. Boy, you can't reorganize your office furniture without calling in a union official. They even unionize audio-visual workers over in France. Watch what's happening here. We have government workers working from home on union issues, and they're doing things like surfing the internet or doing the laundry.
Right. And, Mike, I don't want to get too conspiratorial, but do you think what the president is doing, trying to build up the government, whether it's Obamacare, whatever it is trying to increase that union membership, increase the power of unions in the United States, which left to the private sector are going down to almost zero?
Yeah, that's not a conspiracy, David. You're exactly right. That's a fact. The unions fund President Obama's campaign, so this is payback for them. It's that simple. But if we want economic growth, we should be looking more towards Germany, which has reduced the power of the unions. Germany's unemployment rate is half that of France's, which has strengthened the unions.
Bruce, is it just coincidental that the lower the private sector unions become in this country, the more productive we've been over the past 20 years, say?
Well, I don't know about that. I think that in one area where it has gone up are people that Obama has worked with in the Service Employees International Union in the healthcare sector. Private sector unions have grown in that area, and I think he's seen that, and that's what he's going back to.
Steve?
And they did support him, so you're right, but he's seen it work.
So there's a little payback, but is it true that they're becoming more productive, Steve?
No, quite the opposite. And that's why eventually we're going to get real free enterprise, real free markets in health care. And it's also why even the National Labor Relations Board and the president aren't going to be able to turn back the clock. Unionization is declining. Eventually it's going to hit the public sector because we can't afford the inflexibility. We can't afford the pensions and what else they've done in terms of benefits and costs.
And Rich, going back to you as our Silicon Valley expert, or ambassador, I should say, you know, there's so many liberals out in Silicon Valley who are supportive of unions. There aren't a lot of unions out in Silicon Valley, are there?
Yeah, you know, they talk one way and they act another way. It's fashionable to be liberal out here, but it's actually very, very entrepreneurial. And I'm so glad you used the word productive, because we're not going to have economic growth unless we have productivity growth, and that is the key. And you only get that when you unleash entrepreneurs, and they're not cluttered by regulations and unions.
Quick new stat from the Cato Institute: government workers cost $260 billion in compensation. $260 billion. They get nearly 80% more in total compensation versus the private sector.
And John, Tammy, it's not that we're against unions. It's just that there does seem to be a connection between when the government gets involved, empowering unions more with the power of government leads to less productivity.
Well, any kind of government intervention is going to lead to less productivity, but when you think about unions in the private sector, they're just not needed anymore. You look out specifically to Silicon Valley. Netflix is offering unlimited vacation time. Look at Google's campus.
Yeah.
Companies are competing with one another to win workers. The idea that you need unions to secure benefits is laughable.
Leave it to the free market, folks. Thank you very much. Well, meanwhile, the Cash It In gang getting ready to roll at the bottom of the hour. Eric, what do you got?
Hey, David, Donald Trump doubling down on Russia bombing ISIS in Syria as Russian smugglers are busted for trying to sell nukes to extremists. Will this end up costing us big? Plus, did one GOP lawmaker just figure out how to get the people's work done and done on time just by doing something every hardworking American does every day? We'll explain. See you at 11:30.
I will see you. We'll be watching. Thank you, Eric. But up here first, we know the EPA goes after miners, but did they go beyond the law to block a massive mining project from ever seeing the light of day? We'll tell you that story coming next.